uh, on this memorable meeting day, probably the last meeting of the session.
The meeting, and I'll call the meeting to order. And welcome to meeting number 40 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food, pursuant to order of reference of Wednesday, March 10th, 2021, and the motion adopted by the committee on May 11, 2021. The committee is commencing the clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-205, an act to amend the Health of Animal Act. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021, and therefore members may be attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you are aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. I would like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photo of your screen is not permitted.
In order to ensure that the meeting runs smoothly, I'd like to remind you of a few rules before speaking. Please wait for me to say your name. If you're participating via video conference, please click on the microphone to deactivate your mute. Participants' microphones, participants who are in the room will be controlled by staff in the room. I'll remind you that all comments must be addressed to the chair. If you are not speaking, please make sure that you are on mute.
Just also to let you know, with the clause by clause, we have the following people for assistance if we need them. We have Dr. Jaspinder Komal, Vice President, Science Branch of Chief Veterinary Officer and World Organization for Animal Health Delegate for Canada. Welcome, Mr. Komal. And also June Dudley, Senior Counsel, Agriculture and Food Inspection Legal Services. So thank you for joining us, Ms. Dudley, and both of you. So just to let our members know that we will have them as resource if we have questions. So with that, so we shall start the agenda, which, okay, starting agenda. Pursuant to order of reference of Wednesday, March 10th, 2021, Bill C-205, an act to amend the Health Animals Act. And I've already gone through our witness. So the clause by clause consideration. So clause 1, NDP 1. Mr. McGregor, would you like to address this motion? Go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. So I would like to formally move NDP 1 as an amendment to Bill C-205. And it's a relatively simple amendment to the first clause of the bill, whereby we are replacing line 6 on page 1 so that it would read "no person shall," and it's essentially removing the words "without lawful authority or excuse." Now, the reason why I am proposing and moving this amendment to Bill C-205 is I've been struggling throughout the proceedings on this bill between the terms of trespass and the term of biosecurity. We've heard witnesses at one point or another say, no, this bill is meant to address trespassing on farms. Others have said, no, it's meant to address biosecurity. We've had some witnesses say that it does both. And I want to make it very clear that I think that any intrusion on private property needs to be condemned. We know the ill effects it has on farmers, the ill effects it has on animals, but I want this bill to stay in its federal lane. It has to stay in its federal lane. And the federal government has very clear jurisdiction through the federal criminal law power in addressing biosecurity, but it does not have the jurisdiction to address crimes against property. That is very clearly under our Constitution a provincial power. And animals under Canadian law are considered property. So any crimes against animals are considered a property matter. Trespass on property is a provincial matter. So we cannot intrude on the constitutional jurisdiction of the provinces. It's very clearly laid out under Section 92, subsection 13, that property and civil rights are under the domain of provincial legislatures. So The reason why I am proposing this amendment is that I think that if we can make Bill C-205 apply to everyone equally, so that if you are a farmer, if you are a farm employee, if you are a transport driver, if you are a protester, if you violate the biosecurity protocols in place on a farm, this law applies equally to you. And I think that's my main essence of putting it forward. I'll direct committee members to the brief that was submitted by Dr. Jody Lazar. She did mention that, you know, the bill as originally written might run into some constitutional conundrums, but she did say that, you know, if we had a law that applied to everyone that enters a farm, to those most likely to threaten biosecurity by transmitting disease amongst animals, that would be more likely to survive constitutional scrutiny. Whereas in its current form, this amendment might not survive a constitutional challenge in court. The brief that we received from Animal Justice on page 4, they went into a lot of detail about how most of the risks to biosecurity have come from farm workers or from transports, from people who have gone from farm to farm. That's where most of the risk has actually come from, and which has been properly documented. And they did say that prudent regulatory measures to address biosecurity should focus on the gaps and failures within the sector. So again, another argument in favor of making this apply equally to everyone. And also Dr. Brian Evans, during his appearance before the committee on June the 3rd, that was the day I was having internet connectivity, so I had to go back through the testimony as was written on Hansard, and he did go into a lot of detail about how some of the more serious outbreaks in our country's history have been caused by workers who were not following the proper biosecurity concerns. So I'll wrap up there, Mr. Chair. This is really just my attempt to keep this bill within its federal lane and to not in any way intrude on provincial jurisdiction over trespass. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alistair, for explaining in such details, you know, the rationale behind your amendment. I'll go to I know that I have one hand raised, but I want to also let our members know that if we move this amendment, then it cannot be moved. It cannot be amended again. So probably down the road, there's other amendments that on that same line. It could not be re-amended. So just want to let my members know. And Mr. Stein, sorry.
Just want to clarify, if the amendment is adopted.
Is adopted, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Lib 1 will not be able to be moved if NDP 1 is adopted.
Exactly. Thank you so much for
no problem
pointing that out, just to make sure. Mr. Steinley, go ahead.
Thank you very much. And Mr. McGregor, thank you for your well thought out amendment. I just have a couple of questions and perhaps council can help. I believe this bill has gone through legal counsel and there hasn't been any concerns about the constitutionality of it, despite what Dr. Lazar would have said. I think this has gone through all the proper channels and there isn't a constitutional issue with it. So that would make one of your concerns, should alleviate one of your concerns, Mr. McGregor. The other one that we did have a lot of stakeholders liking this part of the amendment, saying that there are people that have the ability to come on and off of farms and they go through the proper biosecurity, that whether that be truck drivers or visitors. I know lots of the dairy farmers, the poultry farmers said they do have biosecurity measures in place that when visitors do come. So I think that does have some sway where a lot of stakeholders did want the without lawful authority or excuse in there. And the other reason why I think it should stay in is because there has been some concerns by CFIA and others that it is too broad. And this even makes this amendment would make it even broader of a statement of who can come and go on farms. And I think having this part in there does narrow that definition a bit and would make it easier to make sure that it is enforceable properly. So those would be some of my comments, but as always, appreciate other members on the committee's feedback.
Mr. Epp, go ahead, Mr. Epp.
Yes, just further to what MP Steinley was saying, my understanding, and this goes back to the constitutionality of it, is that this phrase is not a made-up phrase by our colleague, but it is actually a phrase used in law and used in other federal acts, which kind of backs up the fact that, or the case made that it is perhaps, quite clear from a constitutional perspective. Just wanted to add that point.
Thank you, Mr. Epp. I see no further hand. Oh, Monsieur Perron, allez-y.
Mr. Perron, please go ahead. Thank you very much, Chair. Well, first of all, I read this. I don't have any objections to the amendment. However, we did a number of consultations within my party regarding amendments, and every time we changed or looked at this paragraph, and we said, that there were concerns raised about the applicability of the law, and so we were told with this particular part that it was better to leave it as is, and that if we listen, I'll put this as a question. I'm not specifically opposed, but if we take it away, does that mean that somebody could be accused after the fact, or, for example, an inspector from the MAPAC? If I remember the concerns that were raised, if somebody who's a witness who might have had a legitimate authorization or who would have a valid excuse, well, so it's just more a question for Mr. McGregor. Have they looked at that issue or this side of the issue? Because based on the conversations that I've had, everyone told me, well, we need to leave this part in there. So I'd just like to ask him to maybe convince me further. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Perron. And I would just like to remind people that in terms of legislative expertise, we have Mr. Maziad with us. Well, maybe Mr. Maziad could speak to that, but I'd like to also hear Mr. McGregor. Mr. Maziad, is there anything you'd like to add? Well, I could simply say that, Mr. Perron, I have greater expertise in terms of parliamentary procedure. I know Ms. Dudley is here, and Ms. Dudley would probably be able to give you more information to your specific question. Ms. Dudley, do you have anything to answer to Mr. Perron's question?
Oops. My apologies. I'm not used to the headphone.
You're good.
I've never done this before.
Sure.
Well, I think, as you know, that as a government lawyer, I'm not permitted to speak to any legal advice that's been issued by the Department of Justice. But of course, you have your own counsel. I'm just pointing this out to say that I'm here to provide assistance to the committee in any way that I can. But there are real restraints on what I can say, and providing a constitutional law interpretation is not something I'm permitted to do, unfortunately.
Well, maybe if I could reformulate my concern. If we were to take out that phrase, could that lessen the ability to apply the law or its scope of application? Would you be able to answer that question?
Is that something you could?
Well, I'm not supposed to give opinions. It might make it easier to enforce, but I think that's something that really needs to be examined by the committee's legal counsel.
Thank you, Madame Dudley. On va passer. We have hands raised. So, Mr. Blois, you want to? You have some comments? Go ahead.
Sure. I guess, and I see both sides of this particular point of concern that is being raised. What I heard from the testimony is that, and I think what we all intrinsically know in our backyard, is that farmers take biosecurity very seriously. We heard vigorous testimony about the work that a whole host of stakeholders do to whether or not it's wearing the boots and having those measures in place, changing clothes of sorts. by going to all persons, I think what it presents a situation is what if there was a particular employee who was rogue, a particular employee that wanted to be able to cause harm or was going to go in and do something of danger. Essentially, we have a bit of a loophole here, such that if they had lawful entry, but yet went and was reckless, and I don't have the piece of legislation, let me pull it up, but essentially, if someone that did have lawful authority entered a building and was kept knowing, or that being reckless as to whether entering the place could cause it, we have a bit of a loophole in the sense that because they had lawful authority, even though the act that they're committing would be excluded under this particular provision. And so I think we all know that our farmers and our good stewards of biosecurity are not going to necessarily fall into that category. But beyond the constitutional aspect that Mr. McGregor has raised, I wonder if it leaves open the door for a particular individual that wants to cause this harm or goes and does this particular act, and they did it under a lawful authority, that somehow they're excluded, even though there's others that might commit the exact same type of act, even though they didn't have lawful authority, and then they're deemed to be able to fit under this piece of legislation. I think it's closing the gap a little bit, and I don't think it would necessarily bring our farmers and our stakeholders that actually take biosecurity seriously into question.
Thank you, Mr. Blois. Mr. Barlow, I believe, was the next one in line.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to Mr. McGregor, thanks very much for your insight and your input. Always great detail. But I think it is important that we maintain this unlawful portion of the bill. And as Mr. Steinley said, we did put this through a rigorous legal counsel review to ensure that there was no jurisdictional or constitutional issues with the bill, and there was none that came back. And we also wanted to ensure that this protected the opportunities, let's say, for whistleblowers, those who are lawfully on farm, whether that's a farm employee or a family member that sees something that is below standards, that will be reported. And I believe that C205 as it stands ensures that whistleblowers have that protection to do that important work. But what we are trying to focus on here is those who do not necessarily understand the biosecurity protocols that are extremely stringent, that if they don't understand those, that they are held accountable, and they can't use not knowing or not understanding the signage or the rules that are in place. But I also wanted to mention, Mr. Chair, that I know my colleague Mr. McGregor brought comments from Dr. Lazar in her submission about her concerns, but Dr. Lazar also testified at on the Ontario legislature about their bill, Bill 156, and she did make a comment actually on C205, and I just want to quickly read that. There are ways to achieve the legislative objective here that have less of an impact on fundamental freedoms, such as simply raising the penalties for trespassing or expressly prohibiting the introduction of biosecurity threats, like the federal private members bill C205. So in previous testimony, Dr. Lazar has commented on that Bill C205 is actually a better way to achieve the goals of what we are trying to do. So I think there has to be a balanced approach to this, and C205, in my opinion, achieves that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. And Mr. McGregor, go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Yeah, and I take I take the comments from my conservative colleagues, with good measure. But let's not kid ourselves. There is a perception out there, and we're all aware of it. We've all received the emails, we've received the briefs. There is a perception out there that this bill is designed to target a specific group of people, animal activists. And while we all condemn their actions of going on a farm, causing all kinds of ruckus with both farmers and animals because they don't understand the procedures and the potential dangers that they introduce, I'm trying to find a way to make the law apply equally. If we all as a committee agree that biosecurity is of extreme importance, then our specific federal law that is dealing with diseases and disease outbreaks should apply equally to everyone. And the evidence is out there that most farm outbreaks have been caused by farm employees. That's just it's there. It's a fact. We've all seen it. And so I guess to get away from the perception that this bill might be targeting a certain group of people, even though we rightfully condemn their actions, I just believe that our amendment to this bill, and if it passes and becomes part of the Health of Animals Act, needs to apply equally to everyone, because we are trying to put biosecurity up on a pedestal, saying this is important, and if you're the farmer, the employee, or someone who's deciding to trespass and make a point, this law is going to apply equally to all of you. Really with respect, it's up to our provincial legislatures to step up to the plate and address farmers' concerns when it comes to trespass. Farmers need to be activists and start calling their MLAs to get stronger trespass laws. That's under the domain of our provincial legislatures, and I think we need to respect that constitutional division of jurisdiction. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Mr. McGregor. Mr. Blois, go ahead, Mr. Blois.
And I recognize Mr. Barlow has raised his hand perhaps as a counter to Mr. McGregor. I guess my question for Mr. Barlow, he mentioned whistleblowers and the concern about restricting the ability for people rightfully to be able to call out poor practices on farm. My question to Mr. Barlow, so I can understand the element that he's raising, is it that the whistleblowers in question would enter the farm without taking some measure of biosecurity before going on the said farm to report the poor behavior? Because in my mind, what Mr. McGregor is proposing about all persons, so long as that individual followed the biosecurity protocol in place, went into the particular entry of the building as is being contemplated in the Act, came back out, then reported, this wouldn't necessarily impugn the individual in question. So can Mr. Barlow just give me a little bit more context so I can understand his argument in that regard? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blois. Mr. Barlow.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Mr. Blois, you kind of lead into what I wanted to just conclude with, I guess, is there are procedures in place, let's say, for farmers, processors, employees. They are audited on a regular basis by either their commodity groups, CFIA, provincial health officials. There is a process in place to ensure that they are following the rules and the strict biosecurity measures that are in place. And if they are not, there are already very strict rules in place and penalties and consequences to that. So to Mr. Blois's question, that is an important differentiation that we have to make here, because those whistleblowers would lawfully be on farm because they are likely to be either family members, employees, visitors who have been brought onto the farm, and as that owner or farmer or processor has taken them through the biosecurity protocols. I know many of us have toured farms as part of our parliamentary duties, or as constituents. And I know when I visit Cargill, and for example, I go through a rigorous biosecurity process, or when I go to, Mountain View Poultry, for example, I would do the same. So that is why those whistleblowers would not be held, there would be no repercussions to them because they are lawfully on farm as an employee, and they would be following, those strict rules. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. And I don't see any other hands up. So I think we'll proceed to a vote on this one. Just want to remind again the group that if we adopt this amendment, that we will just skip lib 1. So just as you know. So Madam Chair, I'll ask the question. Shall NDP1 carry? And I'll ask Madam Clerk to maybe do a recorded division for this, if you would like, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, not recorded division, recorded vote.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc,
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Blois.
I'm in favor of the amendment.
Madame Bessette?
Oui.
Mr. Bagnall?
Oui.
Mr. Ellis,
Oui.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Epp, or Mr. Yeah, Mr. Epp. Nope. Okay. Monsieur Lehoux,
No.
Miss Rude,
No.
Mr. Steinley,
No.
Monsieur Perron,
No.
Mr. McGregor,
Yes.
Yeas pour 6, nays contre 5.
Merci, Madame la
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
NDP 1 is adopted. So we will just skip over Lib 1 and we'll go to BQ 1. So, alors, Monsieur
So, Mr. Perron, if you would like to explain your motion, please go ahead, Mr. Perron. Thank you very much, Chair. So, as I was explaining earlier, we've really tried to look at this bill through every angle and through the various testimony that we've heard. And we think that maybe there's one problem that needs to be fixed, where there could possibly be an intrusion, which is not because somebody comes in, but because somebody puts something in, somebody leaves an animal or a substance or food which might be contaminated. So to fill that breach, we move that it be amended by replacing lines 8 and 9 on page 1 with the following: are kept or taken any animal or thing. So the idea is to add this element that there's something that comes in other than a person. Thank you, Mr. Perron. Are there any questions, discussion? Seeing none.
Mr. Blois. Go ahead, Mr. Blois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I guess my question to Mr. Perron, or my comments would be, when I read through this, when I look at pardon me, let me just bring my document up here on the computer. When I read through this, it seems that Mr. Barlow's, the intent is that if someone were to enter the building in a fashion and in a way that could potentially cause a biosecurity risk, that entrance, regardless of whether or not someone was holding, an animal or bringing an animal in, or whether or not the individual brought a particular item of clothing or food or something of that nature, it would be more premised on whether or not the entry could potentially cause a biosecurity risk. And I think that's quite broad in nature now. And with respect to, I know what Mr. Perron is trying to do here by making sure we're a little bit more specific. I just don't know if it's necessarily needed. I think it's intrinsic by the way that the particular provision reads now, that if someone is entering the building, regardless of themselves, with 50 people, with animals, with certain items, if they do something to cause a biosecurity risk, they could potentially be impugned under this legislation. So although I appreciate Mr. Perron's attempt, I don't know if it necessarily is needed. And I'm wondering if he could explain to me about why it's absolutely necessary, because I'm kind of reading that would already be covered under the current provision.
Thank you, Mr. Blois. We'll go to Mr. McGregor, and then we'll come back to Mr. Perron to kind of do some. Go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm not sure if any of our witnesses can chime in, either from the CFIA Legislative Council, on because I appreciate what Mr. Perron is trying to do, but again, is this level of specificity required, or would it just be assumed that if you're taking in an animal from wherever, that would not be allowed? I mean, I would assume that me visiting another poultry farm, I wouldn't be able to take one of my chickens with me for a friendly visit. That's just not what you do. So I appreciate what he's trying to do. I guess my question is this further clarification in the clause necessary, or is C205 as it currently reads as amended clear enough to the officials who would be enforcing the act.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Peut-être je vais demander à Monsieur.
I'll maybe ask Mr. Perron and Ms. Dudley, if you need any help, you can ask for it, but I'll maybe let Mr. Perron respond to the questions. Well, I think that Mr. McGregor's question is more addressed to our specialist, but I can try to answer. But I'll start by Mr. Blois's comments. And what we have to remember here, and what we've tried to keep in mind, is that here we're putting in place an act that a law that could be in place for a long time. So we want to make sure that it's as clear as possible and that there aren't any problems inside it. So somebody could bring in something, another substance, because this act applies to closed places, but also animals that are in a lot. So somebody could, for example, come up to a lot. Alistair talked about chickens, but it could be something else as well. And could have a situation where the person has not gone into the place, but they have introduced a substance of compliance. So we're just trying to fill that gap. Now, do we need to be as specific as this? Well, according to the interpretation that we have, and maybe our specialists could add to that, this act speaks to somebody who goes into, who penetrates, who enters a place. But if as we know, a judge has to follow the letter of the law. So that's why we're trying to fill any possible gaps to make sure that this law is as effective as possible. So I'm not sure if our specialists might want to add anything to that. Thank you, Mr. Perron. Ms. Dudley.
Anything that you would like to add to clarify or to just maybe explain further on this? Or that you can, actually?
Well, of course, there isn't an interpretation that I can give, but the language is pretty consistent with what exists already, person or thing. I believe this is what we're discussing.
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Dudley.
This is common language in the Health of Animals Act. Any person, any animal product, animal byproduct, or thing. So consistency is usually recommended.
Okay. Est-ce que vous avez quelque chose à...
Do you have anything to add, Mr. Perron? I'm not sure if... we're saying, I think, basically the same thing, if I can try to convince my colleagues, because in the wording we have, it's not as clear. So we're adding that wording, and if I've well understood Ms. Dudley's answer, we would be reflecting the rest of the legislation, the existing legislation, with that wording.
Merci, Monsieur Perron.
Thank you, Mr. Perron.
To discussion. Are we clear on the amendment, and are we ready to vote? And again, if block 1 is adopted, I'll just finish this with, if block 1 is adopted, NDP 2 and Lib 2 cannot be moved if it's amended. Mr. Blois, go ahead.
Two questions to that, Mr. Chair. I was wondering at this point whether or not there can be a different choice of words, because Mr. Perron seemed to suggest it was the introduction of a said substance, as opposed, and I see where he's coming from. It seems to hinge on whether or not the person has actually entered into the building or the enclosure. And Mr. Perron is trying to say any type of activity or the introduction of a substance or thing that could cause biological harm should be something we should be encapsulating. I'm not particularly married to the language, but I'm wondering whether or not even at this stage we can do that. My second point would be, as you're saying, Mr. Chair, if this passes, then that means NDP number 2 and Liberal number 2 are off the table. Is that my understanding?
Exactly, Monsieur Maziad, je pense que c'est le cas. Hein?
See,
yes,
Mr. Blois, if block number 1 is adopted, NDP 2 and Lib 2 cannot be moved because they're amending the same lines.
Merci, Monsieur Maziad.
Thank you, Mr. Maziad.
Monsieur Perron, de nouveau, allez-y, Monsieur.
Mr. Perron, please go ahead. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, first of all, I would invite my colleague to judge this amendment on its value and not on its other effects. But to answer Mr. Blois, according to our analysis, we said any animal or thing and substances would be included under the term thing. So that could be a contaminated object, it could be a contaminated substance, it could be an animal, it could be pretty much anything. So that's why we have animal or thing. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. McGregor. Merci, Monsieur Perron. Go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. I was kind of on the fence with this one, not really sure where I was going to go, but if Ms. Dudley has said that the language is consistent with what we see in the rest of the Health of Animals Act, I could possibly find myself to support it, but I am worried about the consequences to NDP 2 and Lib 2. So I'm wondering if the committee can entertain a slight amendment to BQ1 where we discuss the word could and whether we want to substitute the word would, or as in is Lib 2 will, because I don't want to preclude discussion of those other ones, but they seem like relatively simple amendments to this amendment. So that's just something I'd like to bring to the table as well.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Mr. Blois?
I guess what I think is pertinent to the discussion right now is that because NDP amendment number 1 has passed and we're now encapsulating all persons, which I think is appropriate, and make sure that we know farmers and stakeholders are already doing great work, and this will still make sure that those people that don't take that those issues seriously face the consequences under the legislation. My question that we need our colleagues, I think, to weigh in on is could and would are different standards. Those from a legal perspective, if a judge were to look at this, if you were to enter, let's just set Mr. Perron's potential amendment on the side. If we were to enter these places, the definition of could is a very low threshold. I mean, that's very wide. It could encompass a whole host of different activities, both very, very low risk and higher. And the amendments that are being proposed by Mr. McGregor and myself try to make sure the threshold is such that on a reasonable standard, the action in question would constitute a biosecurity risk. And so that's something that I think our colleagues need to flush out before we can actually adequately address Mr. Perron's piece. Because if we adopt Mr. Perron's amendment, notwithstanding the fact from Ms. Dudley, she had said it might conform to the rest of the provisions of the Act. If that leaves the other piece hanging, I think it's important that we hear from our colleagues about what their perspective on could versus would, so that we can get that threshold. And I'm open to a position between the two. If there's could, would, or on a reasonable standard, I don't know. I mean, this is something that I think we need to discuss.
Thank you, Mr. Blois. Monsieur Perron?
Mr. Perron. Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate Mr. Blois's comments. I was going to propose something similar because I was afraid that people would vote against my amendments so that we could move on to their amendments. And I think that it's important because these are sort of two different elements between these amendments. I think we need to discuss that. So I think it's very relevant. So I agree with Mr. Blois's comments that this is worth discussing. However, I have very strong concerns with both NDP 2 and Lib 2, because if we change the wording from could to would or will, which are roughly equivalent, certainly in French they're very, very close, I think that would impose a burden of proof on the plaintiff, and then we'll have a problem, because if you remember everything that we heard, the issue with applying jurisdiction currently is that when there are cases of an intrusion or something else, the hardest part is proving the damage. And so there are farmers who have had to deal with terrible situations, who then have to accumulate proof and spend a lot of money to get a lawyer to go before the court to prove that there was damage. For example, if there's water in diesel, for example, how do they prove that somebody did that if there's no picture, if there's nothing? So I think that the current wording, knowing that the fact that somebody has entered could have that impact that exempts the plaintiff from having to prove, it lessens the burden of proof. This would just show that this person has endangered the biosecurity of the farm. And I think that that was the goal of the bill that Mr. Barlow has put forward. So I would invite the committee, unless our two experts convince me of the office, well, I would urge the committee not to pass either NDP 2 or Lib 2.
Perhaps, Ms. Dudley, could you explain the ramification of would and could, and I don't know what the other one was, but could you maybe comment on that?
Well, without giving legal advice once again, sorry I have to take this approach.
Sure.
Would sounds like it's more likely than could. Could sounds like it's not as certain as would. So it depends on the outcome you want.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Rood, go ahead, Ms. Rood.
Thank you. And I'd like to make a friendly suggestion that may encompass everything as a compromise so that we can keep in the spirit of the amendment proposed by Mr. Perron, but also it may also encompass the NDP 2 and the Liberal 2, and that's just adding the word will. So it would say will or could. And I think that keeps in with the language that's already in the act, and it would also encompass everything that everybody is kind of asking for here, because it would provide that certainty for both. That makes sense.
Mr. Chair.
Okay. Alors, Monsieur, oui, Maziad, on commence à rentrer.
Yes, Mr. Maziad, I know we're getting into procedure here.
Maybe a confirmation from Mr. McGregor. He moved, did you formally move the sub-amendment changing the word could by would or should, or just want this clarification?
I've not formally moved it. I was just bringing it up as a discussion. I guess I wanted to test the room.
Okay,
first.
Perfect. Yeah. And Ms. Rood, do you want to move kind of a formal sub-amendment adding the word will between thing and could?
I would propose that we add the word will or could result in the exposure of.
One or the other, you mean?
Well, could is already there. I would propose will or. Just adding will or in front of could.
Okay, it would read thing, will or could.
Yes.
Okay. Will or, okay. And Mr. Chair, it's kind of the sub-amendment. You can have a debate on this and vote on this sub-amendment. If it's adopted, you will vote on the amendment as amended, or if it's defeated, you'll go back to BQ1 as is.
Okay, so we are now debating the sub-amendment. Thank you, Ms. Rood. Merci, Mr. Maziad.
Yeah.
Monsieur Blois, allez-y, Monsieur Blois.
Mr. Blois, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. My hand was up originally to make sure I understood exactly what Ms. Rood was contemplating, but I do have it before me. The only issue that I see with this is when you say thing in the animal or thing, I think we changed it to say will or could result. I mean, what's the standard? If this goes before a judge, what are they choosing to use? Is it just simply it could have resulted, or it will result, or I guess the word would have resulted? And so it creates two different standards in my mind in terms about what we're trying to what we're trying to move on. I have problems with kind of the two standards, because does a judge just simply take the one that they feel like is best? I think it would run into real complications in terms of a potential individual who was charged under this provision would say, well, I didn't do anything where it would have impacted. But then if the judge uses, well, no, you could have, just because you were happening to be in there and anything under the sun could have happened, I think that's the problem we run into. I don't know if it's appropriate at this stage. I have some other language that I'd like to propose at some point after I hear, I guess after we as a committee decide if this language is appropriate.
Thank you,
Is
Mr.
it
Boyce.
appropriate? Is it appropriate to maybe put it on? I guess I could say, when we look at trying to find a bridge between could and, of course, what Mr. McGregor had said, which is would, and I had in my language will, which is, I think both of those, would and will, are stronger in terms of the burden of proof of trying to establish on a prosecution that this did indeed happen. What if we went somewhere in between and said could reasonably, which then starts to become the 51%, and it becomes less of it would absolutely be that it absolutely had to be tied to a particular, disease transfer. Could is so wide open that I think it could be anything if anyone stepping on farm. Could reasonably starts to, the judge would use those words to look at, okay, is it 51% on the evidence? Was it more likely than not that this particular action would have actually resulted in biosecurity? So maybe it's not my time to move that, but I put that on the record for my colleagues to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Blois. Yes, I believe we'll have to deal with the sub-amendment first. So we'll go down. Just keep that in mind, that we are still dealing with the sub-amendment that was suggested by Ms. Rood. So, Monsieur Perron, allez-y.
Mr. Perron, please go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would maybe ask Mr. Blois, because the sub-amendment is sort of like the two following amendments. It would bring those ideas forward. So maybe there's an important point that's being raised by saying that having the two possibilities might make it ambiguous. I would like to maybe ask Mr. Blois to explain why he would want to change the term, from the outset, from could to will. What is the goal? Because I've explained, I think, the danger there. I think that it puts a huge burden of proof on the plaintiffs, and we'll find ourselves back in something resembling the current situation where we have laws that exist, but there's so many witnesses who've said, no, there are laws that already exist, and we know that those laws don't always work. So the goal here is to make sure that this time it works, and I think we all have the same goal. So maybe if Mr. Blois could explain to us why he'd like to change could to will. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Perron.
Thank you, Mr. Perron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 points. One is the word could is something that is consistent already and used within the Health of Animals Act. The second point is that we heard from numerous witnesses that one of the goals in their eyes that we're trying to represent is that this is an act that encourages some deterrence. So that's using an oxymoron in my language, but encourages deterrence. And leaving could undefined, yes, it provides a lower standard, but it certainly enhances the deterrence aspect of this bill. And so I would think that should be important in our thinking here.
Thank you, Mr. Rep. Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. Well, look, first of all, this provision is going to come into effect after the fact, right? CFIA is going to have to determine through their investigation what exactly happened on the farm. And so they're going to have to see, did a person enter the building or enclosed place? Did they know, or were they reckless as to the fact that them doing so put the animals in danger? So, I actually appreciate what Mr. Blois brought forward. I think that adding the word reasonably tightens it up a little bit, because could, it's just too broad of a term. I understand Mr. Epp said that it is consistent with other parts of the act, but maybe the compromise here is to add the word reasonably. I think, with the sub-amendment that we have before us, the will or could, I think we have to pick a lane when choosing our language here, that the judge is going to look at that and say, well, which one is it? It's just leading a little bit too much confusion. So I think I will vote against the current sub-amendment and try to go with the more with the reasonable addition that Mr. Blois has included. That allows us to keep the word could, but further modifies it to give a little bit more certainty.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Mr. Barlow. I believe you're on mute, Mr. Barlow. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah, you'd think after 18 months we'd have this figured out by now. It should be a drinking game, but that's for another Zoom meeting, I guess. But yeah, thanks for the great discussion from everyone. And I just wanted to add this really quick, that when we picked the wording for this amendment to the Health of Animals Act, we purposely tried to keep that wording consistent, which is one of the reasons could was put in there. And the idea was that the purpose of the bill is to prevent the possibility of a spread of a disease by trespassers, not to, in essence, create an offense for trespassers who intend to spread a disease. And I thought it was interesting too with Dr. Pritchard's testimony the other day, that she, and I think maybe from questioning from Mr. McGregor actually about, you know, that would and could, and she was pretty adamant of the importance of could, and I just quickly quote her here, is that I spend all day reading regulations and trying to figure out how to enforce it. Being reckless as to whether entering such a place could result in the exposure of animals to a disease or toxic substance, to me, is that you are not following the protocols it could. I feel that the burden of proof is not to show that the disease was transmitted, but that it could have been transmitted. I feel that is the bar for the burden of proof, which is much lower. So I think we can discuss maybe Mr. Blois's amendment there, but I just want to stress that we picked the language around could to keep it consistent with the existing Health of Animals Act, and then just to maybe emphasize Dr. Pritchard's testimony from the other day as well.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. Okay, we'll go with Mr. Perron, and perhaps we can vote on the sub-amendment unless there's other. Vas-y, Mr. Perron.
Mr. Perron. Thank you. So, listen, I'm not sure if you have the same feeling, but I feel like we're getting close to a consensus here. I also, like Mr. Barlow said, I think it's very important that we keep the word could. If we add reasonably, and if that reassures other members of the committee, then I think there we might have something that would look like a good compromise. So if we could maybe move to add reasonably. I know that procedurally I'm maybe not doing this at the right moment, but I think it is important to announce our ideas, our intentions, so that people can take a decision when voting. So if we don't pass Ms. Rood's sub-amendment, but then we modify BQ1 with reasonably, then I think we might be able to find a consensus. So please correct me if I'm wrong. Thank you, Mr. Perron.
I think we can vote on the sub-amendment, which would be block 1 will or before could. I think that's how it reads.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Steinley has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah,
Steinley.
sorry about that. I'm wondering, is Ms. Rood able to add reasonably to her sub-amendment? Then we could just vote on that. If everyone seems okay, pass that and then vote on the Mr. Perron's. Is Leanne able to add?
We'll go to the expert on procedure, Mr. Maziad. Is that a possibility, or do we have to go to another sub-amendment?
Yeah. Do you want to remove the will or and add could reasonably, or you keep will or could reasonably? Just to clarify.
Well, I believe from what I'm hearing is that we would remove will or and then just add reasonably. Is that I guess the consensus that I'm hearing here?
So, Mr. Chair, let me make my intentions clear. As it stands with the current amendment from Ms. Rood, I would not be able to support it. If she would like to withdraw her motion and instead reinsert under the aspect of, sorry, let me find it here. Whether entering a place or taking in the animal or thing could reasonably result in the exposure of, continued, well, then I'll support that. So if she wants to take the glory, she can. If not, she knows where I stand.
Thanks, Mr. Blois. And we'll ask Ms. Rood, where after all this discussion, if she still wants her amendment.
I will move to drop the will and instead add reasonably.
Okay.
So it reads could reasonably.
So, Monsieur Maziad, on est correct avec ça?
Yeah, you just need the unanimous consent to withdraw the sub-amendment. The will or will be withdrawn if everybody agrees with that.
So do we all? Yeah, I see thumbs up everywhere. I do believe we have a
Okay.
unanimous consent on that.
And
are all
we
good?
replace it with could reasonably result in the exposure.
And that
Am
becomes a new sub-amendment, right?
Am I
Correct.
correct? Yeah, I'm correct. Okay,
Okay.
this is the new sub-amendment.
Yes.
And you can, whenever you can have a debate and whenever
Okay.
you want, you can vote on this sub-amendment from Ms. Rood.
Okay, are we ready to vote on that at this stage? Any other comment, discussions? Okay, so I will ask the clerk to do a recorded vote. So, Madame Clerk, si vous voulez bien.
Mr. Blois,
In favor.
Madame Bessette,
In favor.
Mr. Bagnall,
In favor.
Mr. Ellis,
In favor.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Epp,
En favor.
Monsieur Lehoux,
Oui.
Miss Rood,
In favor.
Mr. Steinley,
In favor.
Monsieur Perron,
Oui.
Mr. McGregor.
Yes.
So, yeas pour 11, nays contre 0.
Merci, Madame la Greffe.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Shall BQ1 carry as amended? I guess that's the question.
Yes.
And we do need a vote. I will ask the clerk to again recorded vote, please.
Mr. Blois,
Yes.
Madame Bessette,
Oui.
Mr. Bagnall,
Oui.
Mr. Ellis,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Epp,
Oui.
Monsieur Lehoux,
Oui.
Madame Miss Rood,
Yes.
Mr. Steinley,
Yes.
Monsieur Perron,
Oui.
Mr. McGregor.
Yes.
Yeas pour 11, nays contre 0.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
With that, we shall go to the individual clause. And so I shall ask, shall clause 1 carry as amended? And I will ask for a recorded vote.
Mr. Blois,
Yes.
Madame Bessette,
Oui.
Mr. Bagnall,
Yes.
Mr. Ellis,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Epp,
Yes.
Monsieur Lehoux,
Pour.
Miss Rood,
Yes.
Mr. Steinley,
Yes.
Monsieur Perron,
Oui.
Mr. McGregor?
Yes.
Yeas pour 11, nays contre 0.
Thank you. Shall clause 2 carry as amended? And
Mr.
recorded
Chair,
vote.
it was not amended. Clause 2 was not amended. There was no amendment. Shall
Okay.
clause 2 as is.
Okay, my bad. So shall clause 2 carry? Merci, Monsieur Madial.
Agreed.
Mr. Blois,
Yes.
Madame Bessette,
Oui.
Mr. Bagnall,
Yes.
Mr. Ellis,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Epp,
Yes.
Monsieur Lehoux,
Pour.
Miss Rood,
Yes.
Mr. Steinley,
Yes.
Monsieur Perron,
Oui.
Mr. McGregor.
Yes.
Yeas pour 11, nays contre 0.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
And shall the title carry? Again, for a recorded vote, Madame.
Can we
Secretary?
just apply the previous vote results to this vote?
Monsieur Maziad,
Mr. Maziad, is that all right?
Oui, si tout le monde est d'accord.
Yes, if everyone agrees, there's no problem with that.
Okay, I
Agreed.
see a lot of thumbs up, so we shall apply. Thank you for being efficient, Madam Ruth, be on the ball. Thank you. And shall the bill as amended, yes,
Yes.
carry? Do we
Apply.
also want to apply?
Let's apply.
Okay.
Can we apply the vote?
Can? Okay.
Yeah.
Do I see all thumbs up, everyone? Good. Okay. Merci. Okay. And shall the chair report the bill as amended to the House? And we'll apply the same
Apply.
results. Okay. And so I will do it Monday and bring it to the House Monday. Yes,
Mr. Chair, since there was a couple of amendments adopted, you have to ask the last question concerning the reprint of the bill. Can you see it? Maybe on the other side of the. There is a question beginning by shall the committee order?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Maziad. So shall the committee order a reprint of the bill as amended for the use of the House at report stage? So because of the amendments, we have to have a reprint. Are we all good with that? We'll apply the same results as the previous. Okay. Thank you. I think all's good, Madam Clerk. And I think we've covered it all. So great job. Congratulations, Mr. Barlow. It went through, and this will have our clause by clause, end our clause by clause. So I just want to, so of course, so I communicated with Ms. Rood, Mr. Perron, and Mr. McGregor that this would conclude our meetings for the committee for this session. I think everybody was okay as long as we got through the clause by clause, which we just finished. So I think this will be our last meeting, and I really want to thank the committee. I mean, I think we've done great work, really pertinent work, and it's all thanks to everyone. And I'm thinking about this session. I'm thinking about way back. I really enjoyed working with the Ag Committee. We've done like if I think back a little bit, business risk management. This influenced the minister. This got a lot of things done. Mental health issues that we not maybe with this particular session, but those were important work that we did. I'm thinking of the CUSMA negotiation, our trip to Washington. I mean, I'm not saying we're the ones that change their minds, but I think we were all part of the whole negotiation process. The grain issues that we had one winter. I mean, we got both CN and CP in, and made sure that this happened. So those are just but example of what we were all able to do. So I really want to thank all my colleagues that have been through this. I think myself and Francis were probably the only one from the original committee, but all of you, I really appreciate how we were able to work together on all sides of the house on this one. So also I want to thank the magnificent clerks that we've had throughout, including this one now, and the analysts, Mr. Corentin and Madame Alexis. Great work, and without you, this would not proceed as smoothly for sure. And also the staff, translation staff, and all the other staff that makes these meetings happen, especially the challenging times that we've had with the pandemic. It's just awesome what you guys are doing, and we really want to thank you for that. And also our own party staff that we don't see on the screen, but they're all there working with us and sliding sheets and stuff, so we can make us look, I wouldn't say good, but better. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. So and I just want to say again, that's been the highlight of my say. And of course, this is gonna be my last committee for sure. Well, who knows? We might still be here in 3 years' time, but if you believe that. Let's go buy a lottery ticket. But anyways, I want to thank all of you, and really from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate all of you and all the work that we've been able to do. So with that, I'll conclude, and I'll let I know Mr. Epp, you have your hand up, so thank you so much.
I'm going to defer to my colleague, Ms. Rood, first.
Go ahead, Ms. Rood.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I just want to say thank you for doing such a great job. You know, I got thinking this committee has been sitting nonstop really since January of 2020 because we didn't take a break through last summer when Parliament was in special committee, and so we've done some tremendous work on behalf of the agriculture sector, farmers and producers. And so to you, thank you for being such a great chair. I think should we, you know, not need that lottery ticket, it'd be great to have you back in the fall. But you know, we wish you well in your retirement, and you've just been fabulous to work with, and want to say thank you for all the good things that you've done, and thank you to the clerk and to like all of the support staff and to everyone on this team. I think we've done a lot for Canadians that we can be proud of, and we've just been a great team to work together with across party lines. We haven't always agreed, but I think we've done pretty well for ourselves, and this is a committee that people could look to for how we can work non-partisanly across party lines for the greater good of Canadians and agriculture in Canada. So thank you again, Mr. Chair. It's been a pleasure to work with you this term, and thank you to my colleagues, and I wish you all a really great summer session break and back in your constituencies.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rood. Very appreciated. Mr. Epp, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chair. In the unlikely event that this is your last meeting, my wish for you, if you were a blueberry producer, would be this, that may your juice always run blue. But since you and I share tomatoes, my wish for you is may your juice always run red. So all the best to you in your retirement.
Well said, Mr. Epp, for sure. Monsieur Perron, allez-y.
Mr. Perron. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As I'm the third or the fourth to speak, a number of my lines have been stolen by others. I would like to just say that I think that I was going to propose that I think it's very important that we continue to sit over the summer, but I'm not sure that there's going to be a lot of support for that. Obviously, I'm kidding, but I would like to finish. I think I've specified this a few times over the session, but I am a new MP who's learning how things work, and it was a true privilege for me to sit on this committee. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but you've all heard stories of, what happens at other committees where things don't necessarily go as well as they do here. And so I think, as Leanne said so well, we are really an outstanding example of how politics can be done differently to move things forward for the good of the agriculture and agri-food sector. I think we can all be very proud of the work that we've done. From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank all of my colleagues because, sometimes it's true that, yes, sometimes we've had some profound disagreements, but it's always been done with great respect. And that's in large part thanks to the chair. But before I go back to the chair, I want to speak to the staff. I'm extremely impressed as a Francophone Quebecer by the quality of service that we've had. And I know we've had motions to make sure that language is respected, and it hasn't always been easy because of the technology, the technological problems we faced, but the devotion of the staff of the House of Commons and their perfectionism, particularly when it comes to translation and interpretation. We have terms that are extremely technical. And, I speak English pretty well, but I'm missing a lot of vocabulary. So it was essential for me to really, have interpretation that was effective and clear. And so I really want to thank you for that. The clerk and everybody, whether it was in person or online, we always get a very warm welcome, and I feel very lucky to have been able to benefit from that. Obviously, the political staff, somebody was saying earlier, there wasn't a break last summer, and so they didn't get a break either, and even in some cases, they got less of a break than we did because often staff have to work on several committees at once, so I'd like to thank them, and I'll finish with you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, particular example among others, your openness. I remember, early on I had some discussions with you, and I always felt very well received, and you've always taken care to be fair in terms of, for example, the time that's been given, and that's been difficult in virtual, and I mean, there's delays with interpretation, and that's normal. We know that when somebody finishes speaking, the interpretation can sometimes take a few more seconds. There's a bit of a delay, so we lose time, sometimes 5, 10, 15 seconds. And you've been I know I've maybe had to complain once or twice, but those were really exceptions. You've been very good at managing that. So I wish you just all the best. For the future. It would be great to see you in the fall and to see all of the bills that we're studying right now. And obviously there are a number that affect agriculture, 216 among others. I hope that it will come before the House before we leave, but if not, hopefully in the fall. But I know I've been speaking quite a lot, so I'll stop there, but it's really been a great pleasure, and I would once again like to congratulate all of us for the great work. That last amendment is just a wonderful example of that. We had a number of opposing positions, but we came to a consensus because people were listening and because, people are speaking out and people are thinking, and analyzing the information instead of just camping on a certain position. And if more committees worked like that, we would have made more progress over this. So it'll be a great pleasure to see you all in person. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Perron. It was very touching. Mr. McGregor, please.
Well, Mr. Chair, I've been a member of this committee now for 3.5 years, and I can remember when I moved on in the early months of 2018, joking with my colleagues that I was moving on to greener pastures, and it was definitely true. You have been a steady hand at the tiller, and I think our committee can be held up as the gold standard amongst all the standing committees of how you can bring a bunch of different views together, but they are discussed in a respectful way. I mean, if you just look at the example of how we just handled C205, I think that's a perfect example. And I think the reason is that no matter what political party you belong to in the House of Commons, we all represent ridings that have farmers, and we all care very deeply about how well they're doing, and we want to see them succeed in life. So we've covered some amazing subjects in my time on this committee. I sincerely enjoy the time that we've had, the discussions we've had. To all of my colleagues, I hope you all have a wonderful summer. It's been a great honor and pleasure to work with all of you. But to you, Pat, Mr. Chair, if we don't come back in September, we will miss you. We all very much appreciate the work that you've done at guiding us through all of these studies, and all the best on your next journey in life. So congratulations.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGregor. And one of the highlights of our trips when we used to be able to travel was visiting your home province, and that we had a great time and learned so much. So thank you so much. Mr. Blois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. By the time we get to this point, there's already been a lot of great points said, so I'll just echo what has already been said. To you, of course, I think just show great deference and a great ability to help try to balance all the interests. So we will miss you if we're not back in September. And as someone that has been able to see your work inside the tent, so to speak, of our caucus, you're going to be missed, and you're a heck of a guy. And all the best to you and your family in the days ahead. To my colleagues, I am a relatively new MP, since 2019, but I've got a glimpse of other committees. And to Mr. McGregor and other points that have been raised, we are the gold standard. It is a great group to be able to come to each group. To be able to listen to the different ideas, to be able to have respectful debate, and to try to advance the interest of farmers. To Mr. Barlow, of course, thank you for your work in bringing forward 205. I know you're very passionate about it, and I applaud you, and congratulations on getting this bill back to the House. I think on the basis of the feedback that you've had from the different members, this will pass when it gets to a vote, and I think that's a compliment for our ability as a committee to help put a frame that is going to help support farmers. So well done, Mr. Barlow. And to all my colleagues, have a great summer. If you want a bottle of Nova Scotia wine, you need to send me your address so I can send it. And finally, I'm going to miss getting little text messages from Mr. Steinley. I quite enjoy that, as we have a bit of friendly banter back and forth. So enjoy summer, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
So thank you all so much. I'm not going to say a whole lot. I would choke up like I did the other night on my final speech. I really appreciate all your kind words, and I want to wish every one of you a great summer. And I wish I could have been here at least when the Canadian raised the cup, but I mean, we're not going to have time. But thank you so much, everyone, and keep safe. And who knows what the future holds. But I wish you the best. Merci tout le monde.
Thank you to all. Have a great day.